everybody. This is Dan.
And this is Ron.
This is Anomaly.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Anomaly.
Is this episode 30 now?
29.
29, okay.
Because there's one that we thought of splitting up and we didn't.
Right.
So. And we have our full name, Anomaly Questionable Movies. So now you can go to anomaly.com or questionablemovies.com. Easier to spell than for me to pronounce.
For sure. And we have an especially questionable movie today that we're bringing you. It was the first movie ever distributed on the internet. Back in 1991. So I don't know who had a fast enough internet connection to download videos in 1991, but I guess somebody did.
Well, if you were in college and you had the computer center and you're supposed to be writing a paper, then that was a perfect time for it.
Oh, so it was fast enough where you could get like small video clips?
Yeah, teeny tiny. By 93, let's see. By 93, teeny tiny. Actually, now I'm trying to think about it. Did we actually do that when I was in college? Writing papers? I remember playing Tetris a lot. And games like that. Now I'm not sure. But it was definitely faster than dial-up.
Right, because it was like connected to the main grid, right? Because that's how the grid was originally built for universities and military facilities.
This was Michigan, so it was the source of Mishnah, I think it was called, and MTU. Forget what that was.
Wait, did you go to Michigan State?
No, University of Michigan. Michigan State was our rival.
Oh, I can't remember which one. My dad went to one of those. I can't remember which one.
There's also Michigan Technological Institute, Michigan Institute of Technology, something like that.
I think he went to Michigan State, but I could be wrong.
Green and white or whatever. Spartan. I don't know what that is. We were Wolverine.
Right.
Maize and blue. Not yellow and blue. Maize and blue. Anyway, this is an episode of Anomaly Questionable Movies, not Where Did Ron Go to School? Or Where Did Ron and Dan's Dad Go to School?
Right, probably. That's that podcast will be dropping in a couple months.
Yeah.
We're working
on that episode, there'll be on-location travel to Michigan, all over.
To answer a very simple question, we're going to travel a couple hundred miles.
Yeah. Where did Ron go to school?
Right, we're going to return to the origin. So the movie we watched today was called Wax, or The Discovery of Television Among the Bees. It was directed by a guy named David Blair, and I believe probably edited, produced. It didn't really look like it took more than one or two people to make that movie.
Well, somebody had to be in front of the camera.
Right, there were like two actors. There's a picture of William Burroughs, which Wikipedia calls an appearance, but I don't know if William Burroughs ever found out he was in this movie, because it's just the same still photograph that they keep like fucking with.
Yeah.
So I saw this movie 10 years ago because it was on the now infamous Ray Carney's International Masterworks canon list on his website. And I've been trying to describe it to people since then, because it is one of the strangest movies ever. Like, there's no other movie I can think of quite like this. Like, it definitely has avant-garde tendencies, but it's using them in a way that I don't think any other movie before or since has. There's like a little bit of vaporwave or like proto-vaporwave aesthetics going on, but it's not really, the vibe is completely different than the proto-vaporwave stuff.
What's proto-vaporwave?
Proto-vaporwave is kind of, because vaporwave is just sort of a loose collection of art movements that happened in the last like 5 to 10 years based around hazy memories of 80s and 90s computers mixed with international soft pop and jazz music. So it's just sort of this entire genre devoted to hazy false nostalgia for like objects that somebody a little bit younger than me wouldn't have experienced, but might have like these very, very fragmentary memories of. Kind of like I have very fragmentary memories of using like an Apple II computer, but by the time I was like 4, I never saw one of those again until I was looking at YouTube videos a couple years ago.
But so here though, this is a 91, so we get all that stuff. It's actually, you've got all the stuff that people have seen and are familiar with in the late 80s. Well, and beforehand.
Oh, yeah, but it has that, like, heavily digitized, low-resolution aesthetic, I guess. So, like,
okay.
one of the big focal point or kind of reference points of Vaporwave is, like, video game soundtracks to, like, Sega Genesis games or, like, Super Nintendo games where it's, like, it's almost there in terms of, like, oh, this sounds sort of like pre-recorded music, but it's still clearly being produced just at a faster rate by, like, a synthesizer chip on the board. So it has that, like, blocky, angular feel to it.
Okay.
But it also has, like the clear influence of a lot of it is this sort of disposable soft jazz music that was produced en masse in, Japan, Italy, and the US throughout the 80s into the early 90s. Anyways,
I was to say, but so is what you're describing though? Is it just the sound? Is this music, or are this movies and that's the sound component?
There's music. The big band. I mean, there's a lot of because it's a really easy genre to make music for because a lot of it's just very simple looping and kind of chopping and screwing of samples. The biggest name in the musical aspect of it is a band called the Macintosh Plus. Who did a record called Floral Shop. If you just type like Vaporwave chill mix or something into YouTube, you could go down a rabbit hole literally like thousands of hours worth of this stuff.
Okay.
On the video side, it's I think the most publicized kind of iteration of Vaporwave on video was something called Simpsons Wave, where it's just sort of like clips from The Simpsons that are made hazy looking and then chopped and screwed to seem kind of like they're just about the characters being depressed or stuck in a loop. It's like millennial depression music and video, pretty much.
Oh, nice.
So this movie it's incredibly hard to summarize the plot. So Ron and I challenge each other to try to do it in one sentence. So I'm going to let Ron go first on this one.
All right. So mine is beekeeper talks to the dead,
and mine is guy leaves his wife to go into a cave and lay down.
So and both of those are apt descriptions and yet capture nothing.
Right.
This is all about its images and sound, but it's even more about the images.
Well, it's kind of like layering, because I feel like a lot of narrative, what we expect from narrative film is the relationship between the sound and the image is that they're both filling out this cohesive sense of an event taking place, or that we're looking at a document of an event that has taken place. So, like, somebody walks into a room, we're usually not hearing the actor actually talking when they were in said room, but every effort has been taken to create a kind of realistic seeming approximation of the sounds of somebody walking into a room and then whatever the person looks like they're saying while they're in that room. Or, we see a car driving. Most of the sound is reconstructed after the fact, but the sound is supposed to reinforce the image of, hey, this is a picture of a car and it's driving somewhere.
Right. If you were in the car, these are the sounds you would be hearing.
Right.
It's what we'd expect to hear if we were there. Not in this.
Not in this. No, this is kind of like... It's just like endless layers of endless poetic layering. Everything is working as a counterpoint to something else, kind of like Bach or a Rubik's Cube or something like. Because like the sound in it, it's pretty much just like experimental electronic kind of ambient noise music, and this one guy pretty much reading the text of a short novel for 85 minutes.
Yeah, and if we didn't have that narration, none of this would make any sense.
Right, it still doesn't make
well, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Sort of,
even with the narration, but there's...
It makes its own kind of sense, I guess.
Yeah. He's not confusing. interesting. It's a melange of cosmographies, religions, historical events that all actually come together at the end. Well, sorta. There is an actual end.
Yeah,
sorta.
yeah. I mean, there's a narrative, and yeah, it does come together. And in the meantime, it's like trying it. I mean, I guess like a lot of avant-garde film, it's sort of trying to teach you a different way of reading a film. Most avant-garde films are not feature length. Certainly not films that are edited together like this. So with this one, we kind of had this like, there's a warm-up phase of like the first 20 minutes of the movie. I didn't think we were going to make it because even I was kind of like, okay, this is like a lot to digest at once, and none of it is coming at me in a recognizable form, even though I'd already seen the movie.
Right.
I mean, again, very long time ago. And, but by like a half hour in, a little bit later than that, I was just like mesmerized, and I was kind of in this like meditative space.
Yeah.
With the movie.
Okay, that's a good description. Because up to, I don't know, about at around the 20 minute, half hour point or so, I was thinking, do I really feel invested in this character, the narrator, or am I really interested in knowing what happens in this story, if there is any? And it actually was at that point when my answer was no to both that I realized that's not what the movie's about. And then suddenly I was like, yeah, I'll go along with it. You said meditative state, something like that.
It like beats down your defenses against it's kind of like what's that Terry Riley piece where it's just like different instruments playing a C note for like 40 minutes in different configurations.
Wow.
I think it's called In C.
In C, a good name.
Yeah. And it's for like the first 5-10 minutes, for the first minute or two, you're like, this is kind of interesting, and then for like 5 or 6 minutes after that, you're like, this is incredibly annoying. And then it kind of gets over that like sideshow Bob rake gag hill, and then you're just sort of, your mind starts to wander.
So after 3 or 4 of the rake gag, 3 or 4 rakes, and you're like, okay, this is already getting too much. And 5, 6, you're like, and then by 7, you're laughing.
Right.
You're laughing louder and harder at 8, at 9, by 10, you're like on the floor, rolling over, literally ROTFL.
Yeah, and it's that like repetition, changing the meaning of common images or commonly encountered sounds, which it kind of like, especially a movie like this, it needs to repeat itself a lot of times in different sort of slight variation, or like Bach even, Bach, like most Bach pieces, most famously, I think, just because of the Glenn Gould recording, but the Goldberg variations, it's literally just different small, like slightly different riffs on the same very tiny piece of music 32 times in sequence.
And in opposite, moving in opposite directions.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like any which way. Oh, yeah, well, a fugue, it's just the same line layered over itself with slight variation over and over again. That's where the kind of the Rubik's Cube, I didn't come up with the Rubik's Cube comparison. That's in a book called Gödel, Escher, Bach by a guy named Douglas Hofstadter.
I used to have a copy of that.
Yeah.
I might have even opened it. I remember the cover had a cool, the cool picture on it.
Oh yeah, it's a great cover.
But or you take Pachelbel's Canon, and it just how much it repeats.
Or like how pop music, it's the same simple melodic line repeated to a crescendo over a period of time, but somehow you can have like 8 or 9 minute pop songs, and somehow that repetition builds and becomes something different by the end. When it works, sometimes it just sucks.
I Kissed a Girl, Katy Perry.
Is that 9 minutes?
It's no, it's not 9 minutes. Now you're thinking of like Meatloaf and Jim Steinman. So I think they go to Bat Out of Hell, which is 11 or 12. Oh, but
In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida.
Yeah. But no, they're both like I Kissed a Girl is the same 4 note. It's the same 4 chords for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it switches to be 4 another 4 chords, or 3 out of the 4 same chords, but in different order for about 30 seconds, and then back to the original 4 chords. Or I forget, what is it called? I forget what it's called, but the standard pop progression, or like Let It Be is just
just like
A minor. It's the same 4 notes in that order. I forget what it's called, but Let It Be is C, G, A minor, F, and C, G, A minor, F. But then there's the full melody, and then there's all the additional music. And there's so much going on in such a simple Beatles song, because at its heart, it's this one very simple chord progression song.
And then in terms of film, the first thing that Ron mentioned when we finished this was, this kind of reminded me of those Bruce Conner shorts that we watched in many episodes ago.
It was like episode 3, maybe.
Yeah, that was an early episode. Not that, we're still in the early episodes. Like if we're doing this as like 1 year equals a season, we're still on season 1 right now, right?
There's still no, we've made it to season 2, right? So,
I guess this might be the first, like, if we were a mid-season replacement, then we're on season 2.
Right.
We have, like, the abbreviated first.
Yeah.
But the Bruce Conner films, one of the ones that we watched was Marilyn ×5. It's literally in the title. We just watched the same footage of this woman who looks kind of like Marilyn Monroe 5 times, and all the meaning comes out of the repetition.
Right. And here we got to see a lot of the same images, or riffs of the same images,
kind of blending into it. Yeah, there was like a lot of images of like X shapes, tubes, images meeting each other at some kind of horizon point, like unnatural horizon point. People like merging into themselves or looking at themselves, but not actually looking at. So like just kind of like a cell phone camera, like a really basic video picture editor thing where you can do a split mirror image down the middle.
Yeah, there were a lot of mirror images in this. And they even refers to originally we were twins. He uses the term Siamese twins several times, and when he said Siamese twins, my first thought was, we call them conjoined twins now. I don't remember how recent that term has been the main word to use, and that Siamese twins has gone out of repute.
I wasn't the most woke like kindergartner or 3rd grader, but I do remember Siamese twins being. And isn't that like was the Smashing Pumpkins record from the mid-90s, Siamese Dream?
And
it's like a reference to that, I think. Because that's the only, because like Billy Corgan is not a particularly worldly individual, so I'm pretty sure that's the only place where he would have heard the word Siamese.
Out of the term Siamese twins?
Yeah. Also, like, Billy Corgan isn't exactly the yardstick we should use to measure woke. But...
Okay, now I've got the song from the Aristocrats. The Aristocats.
The song from the Aristocrats.
Yeah, that was...
We can't repeat that song on the show.
No.
It's too dirty.
Although I want to hear somebody tell the Aristocats, the whole Aristocats thing, but singing. I want the musical version of the Aristocats. If you don't know what the Aristocats are, you can Google it. There was even a whole movie about it, Penn Jillette.
Oh, no, that's the Aristocrats.
I'm sorry,
the Aristocats is the Disney animated. So there was a whole sung version of the Aristocats.
Yes, it's a whole movie. It's a whole movie, musical
of like fake cats singing.
Yeah. And one of the songs, there's 2 Siamese cats, and they sing "We Are Siamese." So that's a little, iffy now.
Right.
It's a little problematic. The Aristocrats is an old, goes back to at least the days of vaudeville, and it's current amongst comics. And for the Aristocrats, I suggest Googling it, because I don't think we want to go into any detail about that here.
I saw that in the theater when it came out, and it was kind of hilarious because it was at the Saratoga Film Forum in upstate New York, and a lot of the screenings there, because they'd only screen like 1 movie a week, and they'd have 2 screenings, one on I think Friday and one on Saturday. Sometimes you'd have a matinee of like an older movie on a Sunday afternoon, and they bust in this giant bus of like really old people. And me and my high school friends, we managed to get in there because they never had anybody to card people because it was like, I mean, it was just a thing. It was just the art center. They'd run a projector once a week.
Uh-huh.
And we get there and we're sitting in the back and there's such shine off the bald spots on these people's heads that I literally can't see the screen. It's that kind of room. Like, the seats are all, they're not like graded upward or anything.
Uh-huh.
And within 30 minutes, they had all left and I had a perfect view of the screen. It's that offensive of a movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think it should be PG-13, but it is... okay, I'm realistically more like an R. It is not rated. So I don't know if that counts. No, NC-17 is...
Well, you get to see Doug Stanhope tell the joke to a baby.
The baby doesn't get it. Or maybe the baby does, and the baby's laughing. Yeah.
We never get to see the baby's version of the joke. That's what I was waiting for on the DVD with the extras.
Uh-huh. Well, the baby telling it as a baby.
Yeah, like Baby Herman with the fucking the cigar hanging out, and it's like, you think I'm a baby, Toots.
The baby is now 15 years old. Its ears and mind can handle it enough now, 15-year-olds.
That's when I saw it, yeah.
Okay, all right. And you got it.
Probably,
cool with it.
Well, maybe I was 16.
Close enough.
That was like when I was first getting into stand-up, yeah, so it was like a big...
Oh, okay. So you told your own version of the story to people in the industry.
Oh, we all, like, afterwards, me and my friends that I used to do the radio show with in high school, we just walked around this park in downtown Saratoga, like, telling our own versions of the joke.
Oh, nice.
Because we were like, that's the coolest thing ever. It's so gross. I was like the perfect age for it.
So the movie is called The Aristocrats. It is many comedians telling their versions of the same very offensive joke, each trying to out-offense the other one. And the one thing that they have in common is that the punchline is always, The Aristocrats! I was going to say it came out in 2005, I think. So.
Oh, okay. So I probably saw it in late 2005, early 2006, because it was a second-run theater. So I would have been, 16 or 17 at the most.
Okay.
Which is the perfect age, because you still got that kind of, like, I mean, I don't know if I ever completely grew out of, like, my Beavis and Butthead phase, but I was much more... I could be in touch with it in a much less complicated way when I was actually Beavis and Butthead aged.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, man, I want to see that movie now.
Oh, The Aristocrats?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we can do that for
next time?
Another episode, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I mean, I remember enjoying it. I never had any desire to watch it again, but, like...
Knowing what it's about and knowing what's in there doesn't ruin it, because the whole point is knowing what it's about and one-upping the person who just told you the last version of the story.
Oh, yeah, and you got, like, it's an all-star lineup of comedians. You got everybody from, like, even some people that aren't comedians that are just, like, very famous people that show up for whatever reason. Like, Jason Alexander's in there, and he was never a stand-up. He was just on Seinfeld.
Right. Comic actor.
Gilbert Gottfried, Sarah Silverman, Doug Stanhope. I think George Carlin shows up at one point.
Don Rickles.
Does Jackie Mason do his version in it or no?
Was he still alive? Let's see. Pulling up IMDb and all the people. Let's see. There's Don Rickles. Oh, Chris Rock. Oh, Hank Azaria. Wow, look at all these people.
Yeah, like anybody who was anybody in sitcoms or stand-up comedy at that point in time is in this movie.
Yeah, because Carrot Top is in it too.
Yeah.
He probably won't show up in too many things. Phyllis Diller as herself. Carrie Fisher. Oh. Anyways, what movie were we just watching and talking about?
Wax, or The Discovery of Television Among the Bees.
Oh, yeah.
By David Blair.
So there's lots of stuff about bees. The main guy is a beekeeper, although we also see him in the desert, where they're testing out rockets, and he goes to
Alamogordo, right?
Yeah, not Almodovar, which is what I kept... the name I kept trying to remember until, thankfully, the narrator finally said the name. So White Sands... So we see where the bomb, Fat Man and Little Boy. Well, was Little Boy there too? Because he talks about Fat Man.
That is a good question.
No, Fat Boy. Yeah, Fat Man and Little Boy.
Fat Man, Little Boy.
Yeah. Which are early nuclear bombs.
Those are my illegitimate children now.
And he goes to the moon, and he goes to a planet inside the center of the Earth.
Or Fat Boy and Little Man.
Fat Boy
is that
and
what we
Little Man.
said?
Fat Man
is that
and
what you
Little Boy,
said?
Fat Boy and Little Man. Shoot, no.
There's some combination of those 4 words.
That, because I think he said Fat Boy, but I'm not sure if he was combining the two.
No, I think it was
that's
Fat
right.
Boy and Little Man, because if it was like Little Boy and Fat Man, like why would you name a nuclear bomb Little Boy?
No, Fat Man and Little Boy.
It was Fat Man and Little Boy?
Yeah. It's even the name of a movie starring Paul Newman about the development of the atomic bomb. All right. So
Fat Man and Little Boy.
was he saying Fat Boy?
Maybe.
And combining the two? I wonder.
Maybe. I'd have to go back and check.
Because it would not be out of the question for this movie. I mean, he was combining a lot of stuff. So there
Yeah.
was stuff about the Garden of Eden, and there was some stuff about that made. Well, there's some definitely a Mormon reference by the Deseret, and I think I forgot to look up the whole thing. There's there's so much about bees. This whole thing is about bees throughout, and bees and the dead. Beehives play a role in Mormonism, and let's see what we had: the Garden of Eden, and we had the source, and we had Cain and Abel.
Yeah, the Cain and Abel thing, he goes back to that a lot.
Yeah. Oh gosh, what else? There's the 2 kinds of bees.
Right, there's the Mesopotamian bees, which represent the return to the origin, which he ties together with, I mean, at its heart, I guess it's a film about the Gulf War. One guy's sort of very heavily intellectual acid trip about the Gulf War. There's a lot of references to kind of dead or things being immortalized by being killed.
Yeah.
Like the wax statues that the bees make when he gets to Bee World in the cave. I'm calling it, Blair doesn't call it Bee World.
Right. It's a cave that leads to the planet inside the Earth, and there's also a sun because it gets dark and then it gets lit up again by the sun. There's like a day and night inside there, but it's not our sun. It's that planet's sun. And there's this notion he goes to his own planet for a bit. He has his own planet, and there's an angel. There's a planet with an angel on it that he mentions, and there's a little stuff about other planets that seems to be, I don't know, a little bit out of Mormon cosmography.
Oh yeah, like Kobol and
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't mention Kobol, but yeah, like all the stuff that Battlestar Galactica lifted directly from the Book of Mormon is about these stars and planets that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon and Mormon cosmology, which kind of blew my mind after I watched that, because I like the guy who created the original Battlestar Galactica was like the 78 to 81. It was supposed to be just a Trojan horse for Mormon propaganda. That was the only reason the show existed.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
The guy who created it was a diehard Mormon. Everything in the show is based around, it's basically just Book of Mormon in outer space. You think it's ripping off Star Wars, and it is ripping off Star Wars, but it's ripping off the Book of Mormon even more.
Oh, interesting. Oh, and you have the
down to the names of the different planets and spaces that they're searching for.
Okay. Yeah, actually in the remake, do they mention the name of the planet that they're searching for? Do they say they're looking for
Kobol?
Oh, they just said they're looking for Kobol. Okay.
And then the entire last season of the reboot, it stops being a sci-fi show for all practical intents and purposes, and it's just this long meditation on notions of religious transmigration.
Yeah.
Between bodies and objects.
Becomes much more mystical.
Yeah.
Than about robot and space.
Right. But something kind of struck me about because he keeps referring, like, every time that he's talking about the creation of images of people, like, he's talking about the way that we kind of write our own existence on the landscape as cities. That's made explicit at one point when he has that, like, fade cut between the beehive pattern and then the layout of the landscape or the cityscape over this globe-shaped three-dimensional object.
Uh-huh.
And it all kind of reminded me of this thing Ken Jacobs said, that at its heart, all of cinema is essentially a seance. Like, you're setting things on fire to watch dead things move.
You're setting things on fire to watch dead things move. I understand the second part, I think, but what's the setting things on fire?
Or like you're flashing lights.
Okay.
To make, like, a dead thing move.
Okay, all right.
And that's the heart of the cinema, is like this sort of weird zombification, like, and even within kind of the like mythology of cinema as it's developed, this celebrity culture over the last 70, 80, 90 years. The easiest way, if you're a celebrity, towards guaranteed immortality is premature death. Talk about, like, a contradiction in terms, right? The easiest way to live forever is to die very young.
Yeah, because then you suddenly become canonized. You've never had a chance to make yourself disreputable, or at least, even if you had a chance to make yourself disreputable, that's beside the point.
Right,
you died early, so we missed out on the rest of your life and all the amazing things you could have done.
Right, like, people are kind of talking about Amy Winehouse like she's this great legend because she had one good record in the middle of the 2000s, and everybody still just kind of talks about Lindsay Lohan like she belonged on an episode of Cops or something, and really the only difference in their behavior is Amy Winehouse died really young.
Wow, Lindsay Lohan, please don't sue us. That was all said with love and affection.
She's doing good stuff now.
Yeah,
She's doing a bunch of charity work, and her parents sounded kind of horrible from everything that I've read.
Okay.
So I don't hold any ill will against either of them. It's just nobody's talking about Lindsay Lohan as if she's some kind of, like,
saint,
posthumous saint legend, or like we didn't understand, or there's a mystique that comes with a dead thing because you can project your own thoughts, fears, and inhibitions into the negative space of their existence, right? And the more negative space there is, the more you can project that out. And even with people that live, like, a decently long time, people become much more comfortable kind of mythologizing them or assigning them some sort of, like, supernatural status after they're dead.
Here we have Kennedy, Lincoln, Martin Luther King. And not
saying
even
David Bowie, like, I didn't hear shit about David Bowie for like 10 years. And then the second he dies, everybody comes out of the woodwork and they're like, oh my God, David Bowie defined my adolescence or something. Or he suddenly gains this Elvis status that he couldn't have gotten without dying.
Right.
He got it much later in the game than most people tend to get it, but
it was still, at 69, was it 69 or 70?
Yeah, 69, I think.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, he died so young. I mean, and that's not to say.
It's like, for somebody who did that much cocaine in the 70s, like, he literally didn't remember recording station to station, so 69 is a pretty good score for somebody who, kind of lived the fast life for a very long time.
But when Black Star came out, it came out right before he died, or at least there were online sales of it. I remember getting it.
I mean, it was like 2 days before he died, right? And he knew he was going to die, so there's all these references to him dying in the Lazarus music video and in the packaging for the record. I mean, there's
he must have known that. I mean, he knew he was sick.
Oh yeah, he knew it was
very
like
much.
Super. And it's also the first solo record outside of like certain international pressings of Man Who Sold the World where it's not some kind of stylized photo of him on the cover.
Except
and there's just an image. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember getting that and seeing the video right before he died. And I actually posted something on Facebook about it. And then I deleted it because I realized nobody's going to care about, what I have to say about a new David Bowie album, that I'm probably the only person I know that has been eagerly anticipating this for months and months and months. But then he died. And suddenly, all these people are coming out saying, oh my God, this album was amazing. Have you heard it? It brought tears to my eyes and all that. And I'm like, I didn't think it was that good, but
I mean, it was
that's apostasy, I know. And then
better than a lot of his other, because personally with Bowie, I love everything up to Scary Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
The 80s stuff, I like the singles. There's a couple, good deep cuts on those records, but they don't stand up, really, versus something like, I don't know, Station to Station, Low, Heroes, any of those. The 90s stuff, a lot of it is, quite frankly, just outright bad, like Tin Machine. We didn't need two Tin Machine records. Outside One, Out One, or not Out.
No, I was saying we didn't even need one.
Yeah, we didn't need any of those. And the 2000s record, there's a couple decent songs, but he was clearly this guy kind of not really, I think that the fact he was going to die kind of reinvigorated him for the Black Star record, because he felt like, oh, I got to get all this stuff out before. But before then, he sounded like a guy who thought he seemed almost kind of bored on a lot of those early Heathen or something like that, or
what was the name of the? Oh right, Heathen. Wow, I forgot that existed.
Reality.
Yeah. But what was the name of the play? Was it Lazarus that he was working on, or that they had the first?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be the Black Star record was supposed to be part of the soundtrack or somehow intertwined with it.
Okay, because they have they showed a little tiny bit of it on some on a documentary about him. And actually, I was really excited about it. And then once I actually saw those little bits, I lost interest.
Well, he was at Bob Dylan status, right? Because Bob Dylan, he had this sort of comeback in the very late 90s, early 2000s, and then he kind of went back into what was it, Time Out of Mind, got really good reviews, and then the one right after that got really good reviews. But everything after about 1976 was, I don't want to say garbage, but Empire Burlesque, or any of his hardcore Christian period records, that stuff is unlistenably bad. Under a Red Sky is unlistenably bad. And everybody's like, whoa, this guy had a legendary period of X number of years, but nobody was taking him seriously as a going concern, kind of like Bowie, although Dylan isn't dead yet, so.
Right. He may still make his third comeback.
Right.
Second comeback or third comeback at this point?
I think it would be his third. No, I think it would be his second, because his initial period, it went on, because he didn't really put out, outside of Self-Portrait, which was supposed to be bad. Do you ever hear that one where it's just it's called Self-Portrait, but it's all covers?
No.
It's unbelievably terrible. He just butchers. He does a terrible version of Simon and Garfunkel's The Boxer. I put it on, Liz puts up with so many weird records I put on in this house, and she was turn that off. I hate this. And I mean, it was Metal Machine music. It was a big middle finger to the record company because they wouldn't let him out of a contract, so he just made them press 2 records of garbage.
Meanwhile, Johnny Cash comes out right before his death with American 4 with a cover of Hurt that's even better than the original.
Right.
Or I don't know what you think of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people swear by 9 Inch Nails. I never got the hype. Pretty Hate Machine is a decent record. Downward Spiral is a decent record. None of it struck me as oh man, this is life-changing, brilliant music. It's not 60s Dylan or 70s Bowie or something where it's whoa, this is an incredible. It's just okay, this guy is making very good kind of industrial noise pop, but it's not really changing my life in any substantial fashion.
Right. But the Johnny Cash Hurt, on the other hand, is life-changing.
Oh yeah, that was huge.
Yeah. I remember when I found that album. Oh, anyways, okay, wow, there's a whole nother digression that totally has no point. Yeah. So what does this all have to do with the movie?
Well, immortality through death, right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of talking about, and he David Blair in the movie we watched creates this connection, this very uneasy connection between through this poetic relationship of different images that he keeps flashing one after another, and the prose that he's reading over it, essentially, of kind of creating graven images of ourselves as this sort of simultaneous striving towards immortality and in certain ways ensuring our own death. It has that unease with technology, like in a very, very, I don't want to say advanced way, but kind of like, I feel like a lot of, and we kind of talked about this in the Barbarella episode, like a lot of 20th century, and actually we talked about this last week on the Close Encounters episode with the Call of the Cthulhu discussion. When we look back on on 20th century art, I think the defining conflict is going to be this uneasy relationship between feeling like we have godlike powers through technological extensions of our bodies and senses, which is kind of what Blair's getting at when he says that the TV is like God's eye over and over again, and this very strong feeling that which I think is far more repressed in ourselves, but that essentially we're monkeys that were handed giant toys and now have the capability to kill ourselves through our own stupidity and kind of vanity and arrogance. And that's what the repeated atomic bomb imagery and the returning to the atomic bomb test site as being this sort of, like, he draws all those parallels between returning to the atomic bomb test sites and returning to the Garden of Eden, returning to his grandfather, the images coming in at this horizon point, which is presumably a point of origin of kind of staring at doubles of oneself or meeting oneself through the past. But also that could be seen as the end of civilization being us meeting the beginning of civilization, right? It all goes back to like rocks and dust and goop, especially because we're recording this about, it was like 2 days ago that Trump ordered the assassination of like the second most powerful man in Iran.
Did it even happen that long ago? Or was it yesterday?
Might have been yesterday, yeah. So there's this like very real specter of nuclear war hanging over at least my thoughts today. Probably a lot of other people's thoughts, but I don't want to like jam thoughts into people's heads. And yeah, that kind of sense of like, oh man, we've taken apart, you know, if the problems of nature, the problems of acquiring and processing resources for ourselves are sort of like taking apart a watch. We've taken apart the watch. We figured out how to put the watch back together. We know how it all works. We can reverse engineer it and get it to do things we want it to do. But is that a good thing? And is that just basically an easy way to end up with like a big nuclear version of be careful what you wish for?
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff with the nuclear bomb and the rockets and all that, and death, obviously, all throughout. I
mean,
and
we still don't actually know what, because we carry these phones with us constantly, right? And they're constantly sending like very low levels of radiation back and forth, essentially.
Yeah, I remember. So early on with cell phones, people were talking about brain tumors that it causes, and even I heard once from someone about a study. I mean, talk about hearsay, that showed the shape of the tumors being the same as the cell phone, location and shape of the cell phone being held up to your ear. So I was like, oh no, we gotta get headphones if we're gonna talk on the phone, and which are really convenient. Anyways,
and the thing is, like, the way they were rolled out to the public, if there is some kind of like 20-year long-term consequence to having a phone next to you all the time, we're not going to know about it until it's too late.
Right. Well, yeah, we're not going to know about it till it's too late. So we should be knowing now about all those earlier cell phones that, you know, once they really hit the tipping point, and suddenly everyone had one. So yeah, we should be learning now about all those long-term effects, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's like a metaphor for, you know, we rolled out the internet is a completely, and we did this with television too. You roll it out, you have it replace the entire existing infrastructure of how communications take place. You don't do any kind of concerted study, even if we even have the methodology to get useful data about this kind of stuff. You just completely replace the communications infrastructure and just hope that the psychological after effects on the larger population are by and large positive. And as we've seen, like it really, with the internet, by and large, it has not been a positive psychological impact.
Is that true? I mean, I hear on the. Oh,
I mean, we weren't. You didn't have this kind of ability to laser focus propaganda 10 years ago. You didn't have this incredible ability to like literally study people's behavior at such a minute level that you can, rig and throw elections in a way where you're almost guaranteed to get results through like Facebook messaging and targeting. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's been.
But you also have easy access to so many more sources of information and a much more varied sort. I go back every so often to the New York Times and Washington Post. I'm looking at it again more vigilantly for the last couple of days.
He's pointing at Loki.
Yeah. And that's Loki with the twin daggers from Thor Ragnarok. We have access to so many different sources of information. Oh, I was saying, looking at the New York Times and Washington Post, at least online, the headlines are almost identical. You look a little later through the day, a little later in the day, and the New York Times headline changed because they can move stuff around. Right. The Washington Post one still wasn't any different, but there were 5 or 6 headlines. They were practically identical. I could just take one article and move it back and forth. Okay, so there we've got similar sources, but I've also got access to thousands of other sources, a dozen that I know of offhand, spanning, all across the spectrum. Whereas, 20 years ago, it would have been a lot harder to get the other sources of information, unless you knew where to look for them. Let's see, I'm thinking back 20 years ago, I had a subscription to the New York Times, the New Republic, the Nation, and National Review. So I tried to get sort of a center, left, and right. And I showed them to a friend of mine, and he shifted everything a little further to the right. So that the New York Times became a little right. National Review became far right.
Oh, yeah. National Review is basically like, it's like one step past the Daily Stormer at this point.
And then the New Republic was dead center, and the Nation was to the left, but not too far to the left. I didn't have something that was far enough to the left on there. And all of those you could get with subscription. And the Nation even had, and I probably still has, their annual cruise.
Yep.
Which they call the cruise of the
Katrina Vanden Heuvel.
What is? Oh, right.
Katrina Vanden Heuvel invites you on the annual Nation cruise.
Yeah. So if you're your average proletariat, you should be so lucky as to be able to wave, if you live in the area, to wave to people on the ship as it goes off. They called it something like the cruise of the proletariat, or some cheeky name like that.
Right. And like PBS and NPR will have issues like that, where it's kind of all of their fundraising events by necessity maybe tend to revolve around events that do not attract the proletariat.
Right.
Like you're not, it's $60 a plate, or more than 60, like $100 plate dinner to support NPR. So like you can send a little bit of money into NPR on your own, or PBS, but the big givers to those places, like for fuck's sake, I heard like a backdoor advertisement for Comcast on NPR the other day.
I remember watching shows on PBS. So this was Sunday morning with probably Sunday morning. This show underwritten by Archer Daniel Midland.
Right.
You Am I saying the name right?
Something like that.
Archer Daniels.
They had like one on the Deepwater Horizon spill.
Underwritten by Exxon?
Basically, yeah. Like Exxon created a shell corporation. Greg Palast discovered this. He like followed the receipts. They created a shell corporation, like not the actual. I realize that's confusing when we're talking about oil corporations. Not the Shell Corporation, but a shell corporation. And yeah, they have all these guys on saying like, oh well, this was just human error. This isn't baked into the entire enterprise of extracting oil from underground.
So what you all just missed was me rubbing my eyes very heavily and strongly and trying to poke my eyes out. You can probably hear it in my voice now. I'm still trying to poke my eyes out with my voice this time. So the movie. So back to the movie. So we see all those shots of the rockets, and the bombs and all that. And if you just watch the movie now, you don't know that the movie's about. It all leads into at the end to the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, 1991, the invasion of Kuwait in 90, and then the Gulf War. But if you're watching this when it came out, it is 91. The Gulf War is going on, or has started already. So you know that this is right in the middle of it. And then when you reach the end, it's like, yep, I've just been watching these images on TV. And this is, I don't want to say it all fits in nicely at the end, and wrapped up with a bow, but it comes together.
Yeah, and I think another one of the great visual poetic metaphors that he keeps making that sort of evolves into this deeper significance is the mark on the forehead of Cain, the kind of like cross X kind of thing.
Right.
Where in the Bible, for those who are unfamiliar, Cain kills Abel, his brother, and then God puts this mark on his head so as to say that anyone who tries to kill Cain in revenge will die 13 deaths. And just like, and that's where the avenge sevenfold phrase comes from. I'm pretty sure it's from the King James translation.
Okay.
And he makes first a visual metaphor between that and a crosshairs on a fighter jet, and also to some extent, like an early consumer grade VHS camera, a lot of those would have like a little thing in the middle, and then also to the X chromosome, and he makes this very kind of dark but still very salient point of America as Cain, right? America has been doing all this like bad, violent, imperialistic shit overseas for decades at this point. And for whatever reason, the United States has not gotten its comeuppance because it must be marked by some kind of, like if as Reinhold Niebuhr said, America is the kingdom of God, it's the kingdom of God insofar as God like marked this X on our forehead to save us from the vengeance of the dead, as the movie puts it. Yeah, and I thought that was that felt very relevant to the last week or two. Like, kind of like we've been, the government, the military, etc., has been doing a lot of stupid, violent stuff, and somehow everything still seems sort of normal, or much more normal than, at least I feel like, right? Like you feel like you come to this historical impasse in this uncomfortable moment in history when awful things are happening, and you just kind of think it's going to feel a lot more dramatic when it happens, right? Like it just sort of feels like the news is more stressful than normal, things are getting a little more pricey, but beyond that, nothing has made it home.
Yeah, I think the price of oil went up.
Yeah,
so that's going to affect our gas prices.
Right, and that's like, that seems so minimal compared to like,
right,
yeah, like having having a Moab dropped on you like he did with where did he, or very early in his presidency, he dropped like the thing that's slightly smaller than a nuclear bomb out near some patch of desert where supposedly there were Islamic State militants, without consulting the higher ups in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Or I guess consulting them, but only consulting the ones that he knew were going to agree to drop this thing with no preliminary steps to make sure, like, oh, oh, is this an incredibly stupid idea or not? You know, kind of like the Iran thing.
Yeah. So by the way, the Elizabeth, the podcast, sent me a message that there's a no war protest tomorrow. So
oh, okay.
about going to that. So it was just all terribly perfect timing. Yeah. Well, gosh, I remember the people marching out because I was in school, and I remember sitting indoors in the common area, a bunch of us glued to the TV, like waiting to see what happens and if there will actually be strikes, if there's going to be an actual shooting war. At the same time, and here there's like a mass of people walking down the street protesting, and this is nighttime, and the march was loud, and we could hear it from blocks away. Yeah, it was a really loud march. It was very long. I'm not sure why I was in one versus the other. I think I was more of the oh my god, is this going to happen? More so even than no, this shouldn't happen. So anyways, but yeah, if this had come on at the time, I would have, been thinking the whole time like, oh yeah, this is totally affecting what's going on now. But in the movie, there wasn't any explicit reference. Well, I want to say reference to. No, I don't think was there an explicit reference to the United States. Well, there was throughout.
Well,
the military,
yeah, he works for the military, designing the it's a multi-level thing, right? Because when we first meet the beekeeper guy or the guy in the bee suit, his last name is Hivemaker. The historical details that are referenced are very questionable because, like, you got these bee people named Hivemaker. I think parts of it were created as a fictional construct, although I'd have to look that up later.
It says the guy's, the guy's name is James Maker, nicknamed Hive, and that's how he becomes Hivemaker. But that still sounds...
that
sounds made up.
The woman's name I'd heard before. I'm pretty sure she was real. His sister that's working on the thing with the telephone at the beginning. But anyway, so the guy in the present that we meet, because there's two basic kind of timelines in this movie. There's one of the guy's grandfather in the early 20th century, and then one set in the then present of 1991 of this guy building fighter pilot simulations. That both references that he's creating the graven image of death as opposed to directly administering death through shooting whatever out of the fighter jet. But it also does bring it back to both him and his wife work for the U.S. government in different capacities, and he specifically works for the military designing this stuff, figuring out exactly how fighter jets will operate so that he can create more accurate simulations, which then kind of poetically ties into, the image, the distance, the sort of immortality in exchange for death thing that's at the heart of the film. But I think it does very explicitly bring in the U.S. government. And there's also all those flag images.
Are there? Okay.
And there's the eagle on the dollar bill towards the end.
But I say throughout if the U.S. is only mentioned in the context of the military, I think, right? It's not until towards the end where tying it to the existence of the United States, the U.S. as a whole, as opposed to just
that's true,
it's the military. He works for he's in the U.S., so he works for the U.S. military, and the little stuff about the military. But it seems a little bit like the military, the U.S. military playing the role of militaries anywhere and throughout history. It's military as a whole, on the whole, as a concept, I don't know, but military as opposed to specifically the U.S. military. But by the end, it's very clearly we're talking about the United States attacking Iraq. We see the flag, we see the eagle holding the arrows, and
but there's a lot of visual. I'm trying to think. There's at least one or 2 points where we see the scan lines of a CRT monitor becoming the bars on the American flag or vice versa.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, and I know that there was at least one of those shots where I started thinking, oh wow, those are like the stripes on the American flag, but it's in black and white, and we're seeing, I forget I forget if we're seeing a moonscape or what we're seeing exactly when those lines appear, when those thick bars appear.
Well, some of them were like, so if you film an old CRT TV with, or actually if the I think it's called the geometry on the TV is off, or if you have something that's vaguely magnetic near the TV, like I had my CRT next to my amplifier for a bit, and I was getting these. You'll get these thick gray bars going up and down the screen very slowly. At an interval, and I'm pretty sure some of it was that. Some of it was definitely U.S. flag bars. Some of it was morphing from a prior image of the beehive, which is always constructed in the film as like because TVs and monitors were at a 4:3 square aspect ratio at that point in time, the kind of individual cells of the beehive are always framed as these sort of tilted TV monitors in a lot of the shots. Like when he's kind of going in and out of the different images. But not that necessarily speaks to, is this like talking about the United States? I mean, I think the thing that most points towards it being specifically about the United States, which definitely isn't the strongest suggestive element in the piece, but simply the fact that he spends so much time talking about Mesopotamia and Iraq, which does establish sort of this duality of geography. But yeah, I guess it could be like a broader thing.
Well, definitely at the end we start talking about Mesopotamia and all that, but that's and you see him showing and he shows relics from the Babylonian and probably Sumerian era. Probably some of the cuneiform writings that we see is Sumerian. Anyways, from Mesopotamia. That has nothing to do with the U.S. except in the context of war, and oil. But
like visual abstraction, right? Because language is the first kind of like this is in postmodernism. One of the earliest founding kind of theoretical texts of postmodernism is this thing by Roland Barthes where he's talking about when a person writes a book, they're essentially like writing their own death in a weird way. Like you're creating this thing that isn't quite yourself, that's going to live longer than you are, and is going to eventually become what it's sort of like. I guess the sort of dying to be immortal transmigration into objects thing. And there's like some literal transmigration later in the film, right? Because it turns into that orb and then turns into twin women that work on corn.
Yeah, after the war.
Post-war.
No, but what I'm saying is that Mesopotamia doesn't inherently have anything to do with the United States.
That's true.
They're not related. The connection. You could go through thousands and tens of thousands of years of history and connect them, or in the current context of oil and war. But it's not an automatic. He keeps talking about the Garden of Eden, and Cain and Abel and all this biblical stuff, and certainly there's a definite tie in there if you go through biblical history. We've got. I'm trying to think about. Well, we're talking about all the begats,
the
begats. A little before this for something else, but you've got all these begats in the Bible, and you end up with Abraham, and Abraham leaves Mesopotamia and goes along the Fertile Crescent and ends up in Canaan. But so there's definite connection there to Mesopotamia. It's only at the end we see the convergence of those things, or an explicit, let's say an explicit convergence. But yeah, actually, I wasn't thinking about war and the U.S. military when they were talking about Mesopotamia and Babylon. I was thinking in terms of the biblical understanding. But we're seeing this from different perspectives.
Yeah, and I guess like I was kind of seeing the Mesopotamia Babylon thing as being kind of a sort of thematic foil. Can you have a thematic foil? Can you only have a character foil? Anyway, I'm going to use it. I'm going to go with it. Let's say we can have a thematic foil.
I won't even look this up while you're saying this. We're just going to take it as a given. And if it didn't exist before, it exists now. Or it will exist in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now.
So, okay, beginning of the film, and by the way, this entire film is available for free on the internet through the filmmaker, so this is one I would definitely recommend seeing before watching or listening to us, I guess, because a lot of this will make a lot more sense. And it's a movie that's worth watching.
Although nothing we've said is really a spoiler, other than, well, it all leads up to, the Gulf War, which doesn't spoil. If anything, it might enhance your appreciation of the...
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those movies where, like, kind of when you go to the ballet, there aren't spoilers. They give you, or like a dance performance, if it's a narrative dance performance, or if there's a backbone of narrative to the dance piece, they're going to give you a program that gives an overview of the narrative.
Tells you exactly what happens.
Exactly what's happening. And that kind of helps enhance your appreciation for it, because really the dance piece, very rarely is it going to give you like straightforward narrative detail. It's playing off of the details of narrative and kind of doing what this guy's doing, right? Like what Robert Bresson said the essence of painting in cinema is to bring out the specific qualities or to change the relationship between objects by placing them next to each other in some kind, or in relation to each other in some way. But what I was going to say before about the foils, we open the film talking about the guy's grandfather. He also mentions that he's like distantly related to his wife.
Wow, I already forgot about that.
And
I vaguely remember that there's a wife in this.
Yeah, she works at NASA.
Yeah. No, I remember seeing her, but she's pretty perfunctory, I think.
She's she's the granddaughter of the woman who's trying to create the electronic telescope, which eventually becomes the TV. And so it begins with this return to roots, return to origins. A lot of what the beekeeper character, who is our protagonist, what leads him to go wander off into the desert and find this cave that leads to the center of the earth with the bee world, is this diary that he finds by his grandfather in the library. So I kind of took it as like Mesopotamia, the grandfather, and also the like obsessively repeated visual motif of things meeting at a distant horizon point as this like return to origins, points of origin, some kind of inaccessible past, the Garden of Eden, to that's another like kind of beginning point.
Right.
And yeah, I guess that was, so that's what I took all of those things to mean collectively. And then he was kind of bringing out the relationship between, and then even like on a scientific level, we go back to the roots of TV monitors, the thing we're watching the movie on, because it was distributed on the internet. So you would have been watching it on a CRT monitor, and there's like endless images of you going to the end of a tube and finding just a zero. And then there's even the one laugh out loud line in the piece, which we both laughed out loud at, which was the what was it? I dialed O for operator, but I got ground zero.
Oh yeah.
Of the beginning and the end merging, and this sort of apocalypse rising out of a return to a desire, or a like seeking out a point of origin in the wrong way, or I guess not the wrong way, but just sort of is closing this sort of dark loop of human civilization.
And how does we see the staircases turn out to be the double helix, sort of?
Right.
How does that fit in all there? It feels like it fits in somehow.
It definitely, God, that's a good question. I mean, I kind of feel like what he's saying in that sequence is that like bees, we're not self-aware to the extent that we would like to think we are. Not that like bees have an extent they want to think they're self-aware, but like we're both repeating these like abstract geometric patterns in space that also heavily resemble the things that we're composed out of, right? Like if you look at a human cell or a bee cell under a microscope, it's going to look a lot like the exterior of a beehive. You got these like little, or like a plant cell, or in any kind of cell, you're going to have these like geometric, kind of abstract geometric shapes repeating. And so the home, the things that we put into it, and the fact that we're so obsessed with, because like there's a lot of other ways you could build a house, right? Like we could all be living in buckyballs right now, but for some reason we all want to live, and have always wanted to live throughout history, as far as I can tell, in geometric spaces defined by corners, 45-degree angles, flat surfaces, outside of like large, like there's definitely circular rooms, but I feel like that's much less common, and that's usually only done as like a way to signify that the room is a very special room. So like the Oval Office and the president,
right? You don't,
or in the White House, or a lot of city halls, they'll have like a spire, like a church will have a round spire, but you don't see, outside of like in lighthouses, you don't see a lot of like architecture based around rounded rooms. Although I don't know if like the rounded versus square room thing is that relevant, but anyway, there's a segment in the film.
Well, what I want to say, rotunda. I was just looking up the etymology of rotunda. The origin is the Italian rotondo, which means round. Going back further, rotondo camera, which means round chamber. So anyways, we get English from the English rotunda from something that just means round. But it's a big deal, right? It separates it from the others because it's round. And like you said, I was thinking the same thing about Oval Office, because it stands out so broadly on a national level. How many rooms do you have that are oval? Not just offices, but rooms.
Right. How many round rooms do you walk into on a daily basis if you're not the president of the United States?
Right.
None.
Maybe a rotunda.
Yeah, maybe a rotunda. And he does make this really interesting, like, visual analogy between this spiral stair. And it, like, once he shows it, it's like, oh, duh. That's like incredibly obvious. It's
when you see a
DNA
pair.
Spiral, yeah.
When you see, if you see two of them next to each other, but just one of them in isolation, it's just a spiral staircase, which stands for a staircase.
Right.
Wow. So what do we have? Bees, death, Genesis, destruction, Alpha and Omega.
Alpha and Omega meeting at this like indeterminate end of a triangle.
Yeah.
Or like a tilted square.
There's lots of tilting of geometric shape. Lots of early 90s
computer animations with skulls and wings and stuff.
Or the kind of transitions that you'd have on a public access television or television period, in which suddenly you get a bunch of squares that fold separately and switch from the one image to the next. I don't think we had any wipes.
No, there's not. I don't think there were anyway, but there were.
But there's no geometric component or shape component to a wipe.
And there's a lot of low budget like art films from that period that are done on VHS tape just because it was cheaper, or maybe that wasn't VHS. That might have been like high quality beta tape probably, or something like that. Broadcast tape.
Oh, broadcast tape. Okay, yeah.
And they're using those effects a lot, but I think honestly this is the most effective use, and especially like the only other one that I can think of that's quite on this level of like wringing so much meaning out of this incredibly primitive set of editing tools is Perfect Lives by Robert Ashley. And that's another film, it's a TV series technically. It's like a 7-episode TV series / spoken word opera. And Ashley is obsessed with the symbolism of geometry. Like something about that editing equipment, you kind of just makes you want to like get deep and heavy about squares and shit.
And how many hours is this?
Oh, Perfect Lives?
Yeah.
It's 7 episodes. They're each about 23 to 24 minutes long.
Oh, I was imagining a lot longer than that. Okay. I was imagining they're an hour each.
I mean, if you watched it you could watch it in probably 2 hours and 45 minutes in one sitting. I don't recommend watching. If you're going to watch that, get like a cheapo paperback of, I don't don't know if there still are cheap paper. It was in print a couple years ago, but get the libretto in front of you because it's gonna make it so much easier to figure out what the hell's going on.
Okay. What about, can I just turn closed captioning on?
Might work.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I wish they'd come out with a subtitled version because that. Although on the other hand, like there's kind of artistic equivalents of subtitling that are used as a major aesthetic effect in the piece.
Uh-huh.
We could watch part of that for the show. Yeah.
You've just made me want to watch it less if it's dependent on looking at the libretto. If that enhances the experience.
It makes it easier. I think like you can go into it blind, and if you've got like it's hypnotic, it's transfixing. Like I couldn't when I was in college, I wrote a lot about this piece, trying to figure out what exactly kept drawing me back to this like weird guy with a bunch of glitter on his face talking over like a keyboard sound with this like PBS in the 80s editing on it.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I probably watched all of Perfect Lives about 35 or 36 times.
Oh, wow.
I have what I think might be the only signed copy of the libretto that ever came up for sale on eBay.
Wow.
But the first 20 times I had no idea. Like I had ideas about what was going on. Now I feel like I could give a pretty solid interpretation of what's going on episode by episode and what the overall structure of the piece means and what he's referring to. But it took a long time to get to that point.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's a wormhole.
Right. But back to Wax.
Back to Wax.
Actually, yeah. What else is there to say other than there's many things to say?
Well, there's a sequel that's coming out soon.
Yeah, we actually
came out.
We saw the preview or the trailer for the sequel first, and after watching the trailer, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to watch this movie because it was the images. So a lot of them were even shorter than they are here. They were jumping around, and there were these like 5 or 6 copies of the same body doing a weird dance. And it was just too much for me to handle. But thankfully, Dan let me know that it was a little slower. That was probably part of it, was that trailer. It might be, it might give a good idea of what the movie is like. But this Wax, the movie we just watched, wasn't as, I want to say...
It eased you into the weird a bit.
Yeah. Until getting to that point, like you said, getting into that sort of meditative state. By the way, speaking of that, about the first 20, 30 minutes or whatever, I had a hard time getting into it, and I had a hard time understanding if I'm supposed to be, emotionally vested in any of this. But I have the same issue with movies in general or concerts. If I don't like the movie, I don't like it for a little while, and it finally gets to the point, it's like, why am I here? Why am I watching this? And then suddenly I'll switch, and suddenly I'm really enjoying the movie. But it has to reach that point in which I recognize, I'm aware that I'm not liking this and what I don't like about it, and suddenly, I don't know if that's a cathartic experience, in thinking about what I don't like about it. That's released, and suddenly I appreciate it for what it is.
I like anything where I get confused and lost enough where I can hit that meditative point and kind of like, I feel in the process of watching Perfect Lives, like the 35, 36, whatever times I've watched it, a lot of the most interesting or valuable thoughts that I had in the process of coming to that understanding were misinterpretations, were just kind of places where my brain was wandering because I couldn't play that kind of game of I will figure out what this movie means exactly, like piecing the movie together like a jigsaw puzzle. It wouldn't let me do that.
Right.
And so my brain was kind of forced to sit with itself, which can be, for a lot of people that myself included sometimes, that can be an unpleasant experience for a lot of people and that's kind of why they're watching a movie or listening to a record, is so that they don't have to listen to their own head. But if you can get to that space where you're like inhabiting the movie like a physical space versus engaging with it as a sort of puzzle to be solved. There's a lot to be said for that.
If you're willing to accept being handed a puzzle in which some of the puzzle pieces are missing, the pieces don't fit each other very well, some of them are overlapping.
And there's doubles of a lot of pieces.
There's doubles of a lot of pieces. There's pieces from different puzzles mixed in there. And there's no picture on the cover of the box. That's been torn away, if it was even there in the first place. So that's about what you get here.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a puzzle.
Right, you got a bunch of like pieces in a box. You don't know if they're from the same puzzle, and you don't have a picture of what it's supposed to look like at the end. I think that was a really good metaphor.
Yeah. Once you know that they're pieces from different puzzles, then suddenly it all comes together.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
Any other thoughts about the movie? I don't know what else to say. I might have.
I think it's worth watching. I would recommend it if you've like waited this long for a kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, Siskel and Ebert style.
I liked it. I did like it. I didn't. I wasn't expecting to. I was expecting to be like jarred by it. Not in a good way, but in the not that I can't handle the theme. It's that I can't handle the way this is done, and it was the images and the sound were grating at me almost emotionally.
Yeah, there's like not a lot of effort taken to be. Blair really does not give a shit about anything being pretty in this movie.
No,
like in the slightest. Which I thought was cool. And he is using, like, he's cutting off the aspect ratio of the images everywhere. We're seeing a lot of different, like, low or high resolutions of video, both based on what it is he's using as the source material, because a lot of this is found footage or computer-generated footage, but also as a texture to enhance the kind of meaning and like visual diversity, I guess, of the film. Like, right, because like most modern, or well, maybe less since the rise of like YouTube and stuff like that, but for a while it was like, oh, okay, if this isn't at a certain, if this isn't on 35 millimeter or this isn't in 1080p, it's not a real movie.
Right. And now we've got TikTok.
Right. And now it's sort of a grainy image, is because like in painting that was never the case. Like the level of detail of the image like never determined like, oh, okay, I can tell this is a shitty, useless image because it doesn't look like reality, right?
No, look at if you go, let's say you're in the middle of the Renaissance,
right?
And if you have a painting that isn't using proper perspective and isn't looking as lifelike as possible, it's a shitty painting.
That's true.
I mean, I can look now, and I look at I look at oh my God, a Donatello versus Miro, and I'm not saying that one is a shitty painting and one is not, because one has is more lifelike than the other. No, in fact, I actually prefer Miro, or a big giant white canvas with a red box on it, and actually love that stuff. But yeah, that's certainly one looks a lot more lifelike than the other.
Right, and there's so many different resolutions and qualities of pictorial images that have existed now, and like generally within someone's lifetime, like within Ron and my, within our lifetime, within the lifetime of the people listening to this, you'll have cycled through probably 10, 15 sets of just like kind of vernacular image qualities, right? Because like in movies, a lot of times, like not movies from like right now necessarily, but maybe like a movie from the 90s, if they want to show something as being, quote, from the past, it's either going to look like a Super 8 home movie, the saturation resolution is going to be super high and it's going to be kind of bleached out, or it's going to look like a silent movie. They're going to, crank the frame rate a little bit faster and kind of put that black around the edges. And now, within my lifetime, right, there's we watched a little video about this after we watched the movie, but everything from low resolution Windows 95 clip art, early internet images, poor resolution YouTube, video game console cameras. There's any number of ways that pictures can indicate the past, and so that or imply texture outside of just kind of acting as this stylistic shorthand for past versus present moment, and that's going to be really interesting, I think, to look at going forward in film. Just sort of how this opening up of the textural field that I think Blair maybe understood isn't the right word, but employs in this film, how that kind of breaks open the medium.
Wait, I'm trying to imagine. Are you talking about, say, mainstream film, or are we still talking about, I don't know, I'm going to misuse this term, avant-garde. I realize it has some more specific meaning, but avant-garde or experimental film or
well, I don't really feel like there is avant-garde or experiment. Like, I feel like that
this isn't
after
showing...
YouTube, like, that's a meaningless distinction.
Okay.
Like, the avant-garde only really exists up to maybe like 2000, 2005, and then after that you'll have there's there's movies made with the conscious intention of being quote-unquote art, and then there are Dog Star Man, what's his name? Stan Brakhage.
Okay.
What Stan Brakhage called vernacular cinema. So, you'll kind of see a lot of the same things in people's home movies that were preserved for whatever reason, as you'll see in certain avant-garde films. In Brackage's work, you'll see the influence of home movies. Like, Brakhage was he was obsessed with the handheld camera, kind of the very slight shakiness of it that tends to mimic the person's heartbeat as the sort of visual symbol within his work. But I feel like post YouTube, there's not really a lot of things that are just quote unquote meme videos that I've seen in the last 5-10 years, or TikToks or things like that, without trying to be art, without really caring about being art or having meaning, end up being more experimental and weird just out of not knowing how to do it the quote-unquote acceptable way.
Okay.
Then experimental film tends to be. So it I don't know, to me it just doesn't mean it. If I want to have an avant-garde film night now and I'm okay, I only want to watch stuff from the last 10 years, I'm probably going to go onto a deep YouTube forum before I'm going to check.
Okay, so that's where the movie is, or that's how it's produced, and that's where it's located. That's where it becomes available to you. But some YouTube films, call them films. Some YouTube films, talkies. Yeah, some YouTube talkies. Right? Talkies, moving pictures. Some YouTube talkies are going to get millions and millions of hits, and some are going to get 1,000. Some movies are going to be in the multiplexes, and some will be so lucky if they make it to a single art house cinema. And this movie that we just watched, there was never any intention of it making to a multiplex, but it never will. At least not in the foreseeable future. Something like that.
Right. It probably played in anthology film archives once or twice, and maybe at some BOMA retrospective. But
right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even make it.
It did have a commercial VHS release, but not a wide one because that tape is really expensive now.
Yeah, because there weren't that many made or bought. If this appeared now, this isn't going to be the one that garners millions of hits on YouTube. It's gonna garner, let's say, tens of thousands with a handful of upvotes, if that. if that, and some upvotes, and also some downvotes. This one is it's probably going to have a fair balance of the two. But so when you're saying that we're going to see more of this, and I can't articulate what the this was.
Well, I guess just like more kind of merging of different visual styles in film. So like I'm thinking about like I've seen a lot of YouTube videos where it'll merge like this intentionally crappy Microsoft Paint aesthetic with actual footage with like kind of like Game Boy camera style picture. You know, it'll merge a bunch of these different things, or it'll just sort of use them to broaden the palette of what is acceptable, as opposed to this school of film kind of based around the auteur theory, or this idea of like film legitimizing itself through people going through these ridiculous technical rituals of like, here's the perfectly framed and lit shot. Here is the perfect tracking shot. Here is this, that, and like the David Bordwell kind of like, we can dissect this and find the same 5 things every time theory of film critic. Like David Bordwell, oh my god, that guy tries crazy. But
but you know, Dan, you just gave a notch in favor of the internet.
Yeah. I mean, in certain ways, that is really cool because you have access to all this weirdness that you used to have to. Like, I mean, I remember like tape trading with people. Like, it was really hard to get your hands on this crap for like a hot sec before bandwidth became more accessible.
And now it's everywhere.
Now it's everywhere. Yeah.
You just sometimes you have to know where to look for it, or you might already know. Oh yeah, these are the places to look for that sort of thing, or you might stumble across it by accident.
But yeah, something like this, like this is a little different because it was available on the internet. So if you could get onto the internet in some capacity where you could get videos, you could have watched this in 1991. But films that looked like this, maybe it would play on PBS once in the middle of the night. If you weren't living in a major city near like one of the very few, because like even independent cinemas, they wouldn't show avant-garde experimental stuff necessarily. Like you get some foreign stuff, maybe like some like lower budget mainstream stuff, and that was it. Sometimes pornography, depending on where you were located.
Yeah, art house meant most likely a foreign film.
Right.
If you want to see a foreign film, there's guaranteed to be one there.
Or like at least a straightforward or relatively straightforward narrative film produced in the United States. In the sense of like straightforward, like this is not straightforward.
No.
Right. Like this something with some hope of selling a couple movie tickets.
Yeah.
Because they did have to keep the lights on, as opposed to like the only places where you can really support a theater like that, unless it's completely not for profit, like a MoMA or something, is in a massive city center where you have just like, you know, if you have 10 million people, there are enough of them that are crazy for this kind of stuff to support a tiny little space with a couple film projectors in it.
Or college towns. I lived in 2, and if it's a big enough college town that's full of it's bound to be full of posers like me who do stuff like go to art house cinemas. God, I can't remember the name for this. Revival cinema, that sort of thing. So yeah, I went to those all the time. Right, so I was responsible for those theaters continuing to exist.
Right, like maybe you'll see some Hitchcock, maybe you'll see some like Buñuel on the like far end of the weird spectrum, but they're not gonna show like a program of Bruce Conner shorts in all likelihood.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
Well, I got to see one at MoMA.
Oh,
like,
right. You saw that there.
A couple of them, but
no. But I'm trying to imagine Bruce Conner playing at even the art house cinemas where I went to school, and those were big. You know, went to 2 Big Ten schools, so those were, you know, we're talking about college town with several 100,000 people with 100,000 students supporting those. So, anyways, you know what we forgot to do? Watch a Super Friends episode.
did.
We are so behind on our Super Friends.
And I bet there is. Well, we were originally going to do this as a double feature with the Jerry Seinfeld B movie. No, we weren't. That would be a terrible double feature. Was that movie as bad? I'm just assuming you saw it for whatever reason, but
I when you said that, I was imagining B movie as in a B movie, the letter B space movie, like Barbarella is.
Oh
is,
no,
is the leader of all
the
B
Jerry
movies.
Seinfeld,
No,
like where he's an
B.
animated bee.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually saw that. I don't think it was that bad, actually. But I can't remember. I have a feeling I came out having enjoyed it. Not
So is it
that
a coincidence that it kind of came out like when the Iraq War was just starting?
Oh.
Right? Because like you got the 1B movie for the Gulf War, and then Jerry Seinfeld's just passing on that experimental movie torch.
So what you're saying is that the makers of B movie watched this.
No, although you were saying, and I think you made a pretty good case that David Lynch probably did watch this at some point between the original Twin Peaks and the new Twin Peaks.
Yes. There were a number of things early on that reminded me of the images and sound from Twin Peaks at season 3, the 25 year, the return, with sort of the weird static electric sounds and like these electric lights on the screen. There's the whole thing with the nuclear bomb, and these I don't even know if they were black and white or if they were inverted images, but that's just the way I imagine them. But a lot of that with that electricity and also the TV, because in Twin Peaks: The Return, okay, this is a spoiler. We see Special Agent Dale Cooper effectively come back from the dead. He's in is it the Red Lodge? It doesn't matter.
He's in the Red Lodge because it's got all the zigzag stuff.
Yeah. So without
he's in the White Lodge, and then I forget who's in the. Or no, maybe he's in the Black Lodge.
The Black Lodge.
Because he turns evil.
The red drapes the Black Lodge. Yeah, he turns evil. There's this doppelganger.
Right.
But we see, without getting into too many Twin Peaks details, we do see him effectively. He's effectively in the land of the dead. Or at least that's the closest approximation here. And he comes back. The way he comes back to life, the way he comes back to the material world, is through the electricity. So there's the stuff with the TV.
And that happens in this, right? The guy dies and comes back to life
through the TV, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and then I was tying it to that, and then you realize, you know what? This is after in a post poltergeist world in which we've got the dead speaking to the little girl, to Carrie Ann, through the TV. So all the stuff tying the dead to TV is that's actually, it's not new in this movie. It's just done very differently.
Well, and I mean, even in sort of a reverse fashion, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which we watched last week, go check out the episode. Right, like the way that the aliens are alive, the way that they communicate with us, and we know that there's some kind of other life out there, is the TV turning on spontaneously, the electronics.
Oh yeah. And there's always a TV on. There's almost always a TV on in any of the, at least in any of the indoor scenes.
Yeah.
And a TV that's loud enough that it's interfering a little bit with the dialogue. Anyways.
Don't listen to the previous episode for more on that.
Yeah, I was about to start getting into stuff with Devil's Tower and all that. Okay, that's not a... we forgot to watch another episode of Super Friends. We haven't watched one in...
Well, we did watch an episode of the 8-Bit Guy to figure out what the difference between CGA, EGA, and VGA was.
Yeah, which was just in time for this movie, which, considering the static and not static, I was thinking visual static.
Right, there's like a lot about TVs and also that he does make this great, again, another poetic analogy by the things being rubbed up against each other. The Trinity site where the missile tests happen, and the classic Christian Trinity.
Right.
And also whenever he shows a TV from the the back, and there's a lot of like shots of kind of us coming in through the tube in the back of the TV, and we're seeing this sort of like the back of a chunky 90s TV or computer monitor. And actually all the horizon line shots, yeah, you have this, 3 points, triangularity, trinity.
Although then there's
also like the TV being, what is it, like the eye of God or something he calls it.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember saying he saw God. But so wait, we've got the Trinity, we've got these threes, we've got a lot of the pairing, we've got the twins, the paired staircase, lots to do with twins. And then we've got the fours, we've got the crosses, we keep seeing the crosses, and which are the crosshairs as well. Or the X's, I guess the X's, the crosshairs. And at one point we get it's a pair of twins. It's a cross with the guy's head on all 4 points. So we've got 2s and 3s and 4s. Do we have 1s? Like how many different numbers?
There is no real singularity in it. Well, I guess the only time we see a singularity is when we're seeing like the statue in the garden, like the metal or the rock statues of the different religious figures in the very beginning. And then also we see a lot of shots of his wife sitting alone, because like, why the hell is my husband? A, why won't he take off that bee suit ever? B, why did he run off into a cave and forget me? And we never get answers to those questions.
Yeah. This movie doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
No. And we're also left kind of unsure whether David Blair can count up to 5, but he spends a lot of time on 2 through 4.
Yeah. 2 through 4, a case can be made for 1. We never reach 5.
Yeah, so if you're like a big fan of 2 through 4 and you think that like way too many other movies are like way too focused on the 1 and 5 ends of the spectrum, this is like...
There you go, bringing up the spectrum again.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if there's... I think the Twin Peaks thing was the only thing I could think of we hadn't brought up yet.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's actually something that I mentioned early on in this. And again, it might have had nothing to do with it. David Lynch might have never heard of him or the movie or whatever, but there were brief images and sounds that fit in really nicely in both this movie and the show. So can you repeat the name of the movie again? Wax?
Wax, or The Discovery of Television Among the Bees by David Blair, 1991.
Okay, so I think the whole movie, the story of the movie, is covered by the title. So between that title and my description in one line and your description one line, there's a trinity of the meaning of this movie. So
the movie only has one. No, actually, no. The movie has 2 titles. Never mind.
yeah. It's got a title and then the full title. So.
Right. It could have been a Lost Rocky and Bullwinkle episode, but it wasn't. I loved that so much as a kid that like every episode of Rocky and Bullwinkle would have like 2 titles at the end. Join us next time for Terror at Frostbite Falls or Bullwinkle Eats Breakfast. Right?
Oh wow! Oh, I want to see that episode. Wait, actually, I
think Terror at Frostbite Falls was an actual episode. Yeah. Bullwinkle Eats Breakfast, I don't think was an actual.
No, I don't remember that, but I remember
because there's that storyline where he remembers everything. Like Rocky discovers that Bullwinkle has remembered every single meal that he's eaten. That's all I remember. For some reason, Bullwinkle remembers exactly what he ate every day
for his whole life.
Of his life, yeah. And they start asking him, it's like, what did you eat on this date? And he's like, well, I had oatmeal for breakfast, and then...
So that was a very long episode of Bullwinkle.
Oh, yeah.
Unless it was
his life story through food.
Right. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for Wax, Bees, Television, Death, Garden of Eden, War, Mesopotamia,
Rocky,
Bullwinkle, and Twin Peaks. Yeah. Wow. Covered a lot of ground in this 185-minute movie. A movie that is shorter than this episode.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of our trademark, right?
Yeah. Like, go longer than the movie.
You listen to the podcast instead of watching the movie to save time, but you don't. No, I don't think anybody listens to the podcast to. I mean, if you were listening to a podcast to save time, like you miss the whole point of podcasts.
I still have in my mind what you said early on about not early on, a few weeks ago, about if you're watching a Charlie Chaplin movie and you don't want the end spoiled for you, then you're watching it wrong. Something like that.
Like any kind of movie, unless it's a thriller or something, like I just
I already disagree. But
there aren't a lot of like, okay, Twin Peaks, you don't want to spoil the ending. Although at the same time, the ending is made so oblique in both endings that it got to have that like you can't. They're kind of spoiler proof. At least, especially the return. The return, I feel like there's no, because you could describe most of what happens in that episode, and you could watch the entire rest of that series, and it wouldn't really spoil anything. Although, well, yeah, okay, Chaplin, like for sure. The ending is so unimportant, right? Like he's gonna get the girl somehow or other. It's going like, I mean, I guess the ending isn't completely unimportant.
No, but you were
just the least important part of the movie.
But it sounded like you were saying that for most movies that's the case.
For me, at least, just because I'm not huge into
narrative film.
I'm watching it as a series of set pieces and moments. So if the ending is the only good moment in the film, then it's still not a good film.
That's not a good film. Isn't just about having a good ending. Now, granted, I will if I don't think a movie is that good and it has a great ending, it's the saving grace for the movie. I will still consider it a positive experience for having watched it. It's like, wow, that was worth it. And if a movie is really good all the way through and then has a bad ending, I'm like, forget this movie. I'm not recommending this to anyone. That totally ruins the experience. Like, say, my time has been wasted. But all that said, not just about the ending. I don't know. Okay, Arrival. I had that at the top of for the past decade. Or Phantom Thread, which I did not put on there. But by the way, the ending of it still sticks in my mind. And I still wonder if maybe I should have put that higher up on my list. If you had told me the ending, I would never have forgiven you. If you told me the ending to Arrival, I never would have forgiven you. And it's not that there's a twist or anything necessarily to it, but, I don't want to know the conclusion. To most movies and most stories, I don't want to know the conclusion to it until I've gone through the whole until I've gone through the whole story and the whole process.
See, I feel like most of my favorite, like even my favorite narrative films, because like I'm going to spoil the end of A Woman Under the Influence for you right now.
Okay.
Two people clean a house, there's a phone ringing, and nobody answers it.
Okay. But which told me nothing.
The entire movie.
What was it? Oh, I don't know.
Ruin the entire movie for you. You'll find out.
Well, the nice thing is I'm going to forget this. By an hour from now, I'm going to forget this. I might remember there's something about a phone. All right. Yeah, we are getting punchy.
All right. This has been Dan.
And this has been Ron.
And this has been a nominee.
Questionable movies. All right. Take care, everyone.
Later.